I'm not sure why every build comes with its own challenges. Is it because I try new things or do I lack skills? But in the end, the build did come out well. I hope that one day I'll build something with no mess ups or disasters. I have had a project in mind for at least 3 to 4 years that I never managed to undertake. It's an epoxy ocean table or a ocean art piece featuring fish, shells, whales and more. The main obstacle was the cost of epoxy and I lacked confidence that I could successfully pull it off. However, things have changed and I'll go into the details shortly. For this project, I opted for a cherry slab offcut that I got for $5 a few years back. I thought it would be perfect for this project, especially with its sap wood at the end. I began the project by milling the cherry slab to achieve a uniform thickness. Since I don't have a 12-inch or larger jointer to flatten one side, I made a simple planer sled to flatten the slab. Once the slab is flat, I removed the bark and cut one side to achieve a uniform length. Using my workbench and a drywall square, I drew a line and then used a track saw to make a straight cut. After that, I cut the slab in the middle and sanded the leftover bark dust. Now let me share why this project became possible. A few weeks ago, Jay Dixon contacted me and asked if I would be interested in doing an epoxy project and they would supply the needed epoxy. Without any hesitation, I said yes, giving my long-standing desire to create this ocean project that I wanted to build for years. Jadiction sells resin for various crafts. The resin has some great features such as self-leveling, a long-lasting anti-yellowing effect, a self-defoaming formula, and crystal clear results. For this particular project, I used the deep pour epoxy, which allows for pouring up to 2 inches in thickness for each pour. I initially had doubts about achieving a crystal clear end product. You'll see later in the video why I had doubts. However, after witnessing the end results, my concerns were completely cleared. I decided to do a total of 3 pours for this build. In the first pour, I used a blue pigment to achieve a dark tinted epoxy at the bottom. To achieve a wave effect, I added some white pigment and attempted to spread it with a heat gun. However, it did not give me the desired look I was expecting. Subsequently, I stirred it with a stick to create the pattern. Since the epoxy was still in a liquid form, the intended shape wasn't holding. So I stirred it multiple times over a period of few hours. In the meantime, my daughter could not wait until the epoxy thickened enough to place the fish. So I asked her to go ahead and place 3 fish, which eventually dissolved into the epoxy. The next day, after the epoxy has cured a bit and was no longer sticky, I placed the fish, whales and other sea animals. This process took a while because I often change their placement. Once the arrangement was set, I used a CA glue and activator to attach the fish to the epoxy surface. I opted for CA glue because I don't want them to float when the second pour of epoxy was added. The CA glue trick worked well. Not having my daughter around this process made her mad, and I had to buy a present to calm her down. I think these are the perks of being a father. After placing the fish, I mixed the epoxy for the second pour without adding any pigment because I wanted it to be clear. As mentioned earlier, I had my doubts about this epoxy and they intensified during the second pour. As you can see, the pour ended up with numerous bubbles, giving it a frosty look, and I could not see the bottom layer. I thought this table was ruined, but after contacting the Jadiction team, they explained that their self-defoaming function would eliminate any bubbles that may have occurred during the pour. As you can see, all the bubbles disappeared after some time, leaving the epoxy crystal clear. After letting the second pour cure, I proceeded with the third pour. The third pour also produced a lot of bubbles, but they eventually disappeared. Their self-defoaming feature works as advertised. This is a time-lapse video demonstrating their self-defoaming feature. It took a couple of hours to get rid of all the bubbles. Demolding went like a breeze. Taking proper precautions such as covering the surface with Tyvek tape, applying mold release spray, and sealing all the edges and corners with silicone caulk helps. After demolding, I noticed an issue with the white pigment. As it dissolved in the epoxy, the pigment settled at the bottom, causing problems. When I touch the pigment, I can see that it sticks to my hand. This did not turn out to be a disaster. I sanded the surface to get rid of all the pigment using a drum sander. During the sanding, I noticed that even the fish that has dissolved got sanded. Since it's in the backside of the piece and I am building it for myself, it's not a big deal. Afterward, I used a combination of jointer and a table saw to achieve the final dimensions of the piece. Following that, I sanded it up to 320 grit and applied a couple of coats of Rubio Monocoat. Rubio Monocoat has been my go-to finish for few years. It's easy to apply with very little chance of messing it up. If I'm applying a second coat, I sand with a maroon pad in between the coats. If you are still watching this build, you might have enjoyed the video. Showing your support by subscribing to my channel and liking or commenting will help the growth of my channel and provide me with the motivation to create more content. For the base, I used sapwood waste from my last project. The plan is to build a simple base by creating dados in the middle and placing the ocean art piece within the dado. I started making two bases so I can choose which one looks better for the final outcome. Once I finalized the base, I rounded over the corners and edges with a palm router to match the rounded edges of the ocean art piece. I branded my logo on the back and sanded away the yellow residue left by the branding iron. Then I sanded up to 180 grit and applied one coat of Rubio Monocoat. When inserting the ocean art piece into the base, I did not apply any glue. The joint is tight, and in the future, if I want to change the base, it will be easy. The base is half an inch longer than the length of the ocean art, so I used a mallet to adjust it and leave an even gap at both ends. Overall, this turned out to be great. I was initially concerned about having bubbles inside the resin, but my decision to use J-Diction Deep Pour Epoxy was the right one. If you are interested in using J-Diction Deep Pour Epoxy, I'll leave a link in the description. Use the code SRINIJDCraft for a 10% discount. I had plans to inlay LED lights. When I tested it, it looked good when the LEDs were placed on top. However, I did not want to inlay it on top and risk ruining the piece, so I decided against it. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end. You are practically my video soulmate now. If you had even half as much fun as I did making this, hit that subscribe button to keep the good times rolling. Bye for now, and I'll see you next time.